So this is our last chance, as she lives in Tulsa, to thank Dr. Pittman, and I'd like to introduce Dr. Nancy.
Oh, thank you. Thank you, Connie. Thank you, Connie. I think my microphone is on. So we're in a season of lasts. I've been teaching you all for probably 15, 20 years, off and on. I come in, burble at you, tell you about the things that are most exciting to me, and you all act like, that's exciting to me too. Thank you. This class has come to mean a lot to me personally. Hi, Judy. How is Mike?
He's where he needs to be.
Okay. Is he okay?
But it's really hard. Really hard for him to have to start to learn people. But he's a
Yeah. This class has meant so much to me, and the support that people have given to me personally has meant more than you will ever know. Sometimes being in leadership is really hard, and there are challenges, decisions to be made. Sometimes I think I made the right ones, sometimes maybe not so much. But your eternal, constant support and affirmation has made it possible in many ways for me to go to Phillips on Monday and say, okay, I have been put in this place for this time, and because you believe in me, I can believe in myself too. Thank you. Please always remember that Phillips knows what this class has meant to Phillips. The leaders of this class came in at a time when we had nothing but some dreams and some hopes that we could in fact continue to educate ministers. And so many of you present in this room and who have gone on to glory have participated in that work. Please know that I have made a good many notes. I found out, Christy told me just this week, that when Daryl was in the hospital, Daryl Southard, it was most important to him that he had everything in line so that the life insurance that he had made Phillips the beneficiary was ready to go. That was his number one thought on that day. We cannot express our gratitude strongly enough for the work that you all have done. The golf tournaments you've hosted, the fundraisers you've attended. Thank you. The board meetings you go to, looking at Ron and Mike and so many other people who have served here. Thinking about Oliver this morning. Okay. We'll go to the cold and clinical, dispassionate book of interpreting the book of Revelation. But please know, just please know, you are such good and faithful people doing the Lord's work, and you make it possible for us to do the Lord's work too. Thank you. Okay, here's what I want to emphasize today as we wrap up this very mysterious book. I have said to you several times that there are three images of Christ in the book of Revelation that serve as the dividing lines for the development of the plot. So it opens with Jesus the messenger. A door in heaven opens at chapter 4, and John is invited to come up. And then we see the slain lamb, Jesus the slain lamb. And then, as we'll see today, the whole entire heaven opens up, and Jesus is shown as a slaying warrior. So, there are also 3 images of community. And as surely as that Christ figure is male, the 3 images of community are female. Now, this is not odd in the ancient world. It's not even that odd in the modern world. After all, navies all over the world call their ships she. And the reason for that is that oftentimes collective communities are seen as partners of whatever deity or even leader that there is in power. So that communities throughout the ancient world and even today are often referred to as she. Now remember, I told you the first Sunday I was here, we never read this book. You'll know why when we finish this. But we sing it all the time. And every time we sing about the bride of Christ, she, we are quoting Revelation. We're quoting, that image is so strong throughout this. So 3 images of community that are all female. And they are part of that long trajectory that we also see in the Hebrew Bible of defining Israel and Judah as female because they're partners with the Holy One, Adonai. So when they're so we know that in Hosea, why anyone would name a daughter Gomer, nobody knows. That's kind of like a boy named Sue, but okay. We know there's Gomer and Hosea talking about the whole conversations about this woman and man. And Gomer is an image of the idolatrous community. Now John the Revealer is taking all of that and reimagining community. So, last week, just a quick recap, we talked about this first image, and this is the Queen of the Sun in those outlines that I see none of you brought, but okay. I forgot to make the copies again. So you're seeing the Queen of Heaven. And remember, we agreed she is clearly a Mary. And remember I told you that John is using a very common story in the ancient Near East called the combat myth to tell a story about the dragon and Mary and God. And remember I told you that there was a prophecy that in that particular story that if this woman who was impregnated by a god gave birth to a male child, the male child would destroy the enemy of God. That's clearly the whole point of Revelation. So we see how clever John is in picking up the stuff of his culture and weaving it into a compelling story. Okay, Mary. But remember, we also notice that in the text, John talks about the dragon making war on her and her children. And suddenly we've gone from a straight 1-in-1 correlation, Queen of Heaven equals Mary, to Queen of Heaven thrown down to earth, chased by the dragon, is the persecuted community. And this now becomes a story of what it means to be a victim. well, the heavens and the earth are spewing water to save her, and she's taken away and all that. She's always saved, but she's constantly pursued. She is the persecuted community. Now, throughout history, there have been periods of time in which Christians and followers of Jesus have been persecuted. I told you there was the persecution for Nero. Probably not when the book of Revelation was written. In the 2nd and 3rd centuries, Rome continued to persecute Christians off and on until, of course, Constantine got saved. And then suddenly everything was great. Everything was great for Christians. But we've seen this kind of persecuted community happening. I mentioned some weeks ago Alan Bosak, a leader in South Africa, very strong leader against the apartheid regime of the South African government. And he wrote an entire book of Revelation based on his experience and his community's experience as persecuted in South Africa. When Martin Luther King Jr. wrote a letter from a Birmingham jail, he too is drawing upon the image of persecuted Christians who are being victimized by the larger society. Now, before anyone says it, I'll say it. People who choose to stand on the right of justice and freedom can also be persecuted in the name of Jesus. And the reason I say that is because we used to, long ago, sit around and debate, well, Martin Luther King wasn't being persecuted because he was a Christian. He was being persecuted because he was against racism. Well, tell me the definition of Christian and following Jesus. Well, anti-racist. So I am inviting you to remember that persons who pick up causes that are just and righteous, and communities that insist on fairness, equities, freedoms, are also followers of Jesus in that sense. Okay, that's the end of that sermon. And now the next one. But the story doesn't end there for John. It is not simply about victimization, and it's not simply about persecution. For there are other things that have to be revealed, that John has to reveal about what it means to be human community. So, I am going to read to you the next picture of human community that John gives. And Betsy showed me how to do this. Okay. I know. Betsy, you got a job at Phillips. Okay, can you see that woman? Okay, and she's riding a really strange looking animal that and remember, these are the Durer woodcuts. As I read about her, then you can look at this particular section. At this point in Durer's project, he's made these 16 woodcuts, and he's toward the end, and really the first 10 are like the first 10 books of Revelation. Then he's only got a few more, so he starts really packing it in there. So I'm really grateful to Betsy for this. Here's what he says. Then one of the 7 angels who had the 7 bowls came and said to me, "Come, I will show you the judgment of the great whore who is seated on many waters, with whom the kings of the earth have committed fornication, and with the wine of whose fornication the inhabitants of the earth have become drunk." So he carried me away in the Spirit into a wilderness, and I saw a woman sitting on a scarlet beast that was full of blasphemous names, and it had 7 heads and 10 horns. The woman was clothed in purple and scarlet, and adorned with gold and jewels and pearls, holding in her hand a golden cup full of abominations and the impurities of her fornication. And on her forehead was written a name, a mystery, Babylon the Great, mother of whores and of earth's abominations. And I saw that the woman was drunk with the blood of the saints and the blood of the witnesses to Jesus. When I saw her, I was really amazed, but the angel said to me, "Why are you so amazed? I'll tell you the mystery of the woman and of the beast with 7 heads and 10 horns that carries her. The beast that you saw was and is not and is about to ascend from the bottomless pit and go to destruction. And the inhabitants of the earth, whose names have not been written in the book of life from the foundation of the world, will be amazed when they see the beast, because it was and is not and is to come." So what do you notice about this woman?
She looks really sad.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, she does.
She's holding a pizza.
Yes, that's right. She's from Rome. She's got pizza. No, she's holding that's kind of a cup. Let's see if I can hear. See, there. Does that better? Yeah, sorry. That's a kind of a cup that she's holding. And you can see the 7 heads and the 10 horns of the beast. Now, remember I told you I was not going to bore you with all the dating details that we decide, but now I am. I just changed my mind. I'm going to bore you. When you see these 7 heads and 10 horns, the 7 heads, and John does say this, I just didn't go on to read it, are the 7 mountains or hills. Well, you know Rome has always been anciently known as the city of 7 hills or mountains, and it's been divided since time immemorial into 7 sections. So that's pretty clear. The 10 horns may refer to the numbers of emperors between the time Jesus was born and that period. That's part of why we can date it at Domitian's time, because we're counting horns. But it's a more complicated issue because in the entire first century, emperors are always killing each other, and there was such a major civil war that there were 3 emperors within a very short period, like 2 years, 3 emperors. And they didn't have time to get deified before they changed, and in the special deification ceremonies that were common in those years. So that becomes kind of complicated. The other thing, though, that you'll notice is she has a name, Babylon. By the end of the first century, all over much of some literature of the ancient world, Babylon has become a kind of code name for Rome. And that didn't happen until later in the first century. It didn't start very early. And I mean by that in Jewish and early Christian writings, Babylon becomes that code word. And why would it be Babylon? This is your Hebrew Bible test. When Dr. Davison's here, you can tell her you know this. Why is it Babylon? Because Babylon's the country that destroyed Jerusalem 600 years before this. So Babylon's the one that came in and destroyed and carried away the leaders to Babylon. So clearly she is a horrific figure. She's dressed in the trappings of wealth. Poor people couldn't afford red and purple cloth. She's wearing jewels. She's drunk with the wine of the blood of the saints. She looks and seems to be a most unappealing person. She is the idolatrous community. She is the one who has made her peace with the Roman Empire and in so doing has become idolatrous. Now this is really important to pay attention to. Throughout the centuries of the interpretation of Revelation, identifying her is become kind of a blood sport. And so, that we want to name her as, oh, remember when Hal Lindsey was first writing, she was the European Economic Community, which of course is no longer, but became something else. They've looked for ways to identify, interpreters, to identify her clearly as one or another world power. But remember, I told you yesterday, and last week, and I'm thoroughly convinced, I know you probably are too, just because I said it, but this book is written to a predominantly Christian audience who are trying to figure out how to live in the Roman Empire and be faithful to Jesus. And when John, we didn't do this, but when John is writing to the 7 churches, the only persons that are condemned by code name are members of the proto-Christian community. That adds to this whole sense of this is a conversation among followers of Jesus about how we're going to live. So now, if we look at it that way, the idolatrous community becomes actually those Christians in John's world who choose to make peace with Rome. And remember, making peace with Rome means participating in the civic, religious practices. Going down the street for the trade guild meals, which consisted of food that had been offered to Roman gods. It consisted of, even for John, and now I'm really going to step on our toes. Actually, I really liked when David talked about Jesus punching us in the face. Although I did tell David, I never confuse you with Jesus. You're punching us in the face. It's just that you're right. This is a punch in the face because John is also talking about those Christians who are prospering from the gifts of the empire. Safe roads, clean water, relative peace, stable government. All of that was going on in that late first century. And when you have a little more stability, economic growth can grow. Oh yeah, I can't get anyone to look at my house right now because we don't have stability right now. But when all the elections decided and we've moved on, then we will know and economic stability is again possible, right? It's the same thing works. It works all the time. But John will have none of this economic stability because he's also very concerned about the persons who are left out of the financial growth of the Roman Empire. So now that we've all stepped on toes and been punched in the face, this woman is us. Every time we choose our own prosperity, our own, let's get along with the government because it does provide economic stability, all of that, in John's eyes, we're participating in the idolatrous community. Betsy, should we turn the lights on for a minute? People are falling asleep. It's really irritating. Yeah.
The guy in the lower left-hand corner with the bowler hat on.
Uh-huh. Well, let's remember. That's such a great question. Durer, he's a prosperous lord of 16th century Germany. Remember, Durer was carving his woodcuts. Excuse me. Durer was carving these woodcuts in the late 1500s. And like artists everywhere, all the time, he puts all the characters in the clothing and the tropes of his time. I don't think we've seen it here, and I haven't pointed this out, but Dürer was a Lutheran and was a big part of the movement that became Lutheranism. He really followed Luther. And he began to depict the evil people that have on their heads the papal mitre. So for Dürer, and later Martin Luther, Revelation became a screed against the Catholic Church, and she's the Catholic Church. So it's very convenient. It's really easy to figure out who's your enemy and then make her look like that. And then you don't have to worry about whether you're there or not, because you just said somebody else is there. Okay, other questions? Did that help? So yeah, prosperous business people. I'm breathing. That's why we're just sitting here in silence.
She kind of looks like Pluto, doesn't she?
That's right. Oh, she's Russia, as it turns out. Okay. Things look really bad, and if you remember the outline, because you really have memorized it, we've gone through terrible, terrible, terrible things. This woman is kind of the pinnacle of that terrible thing when she is revealed, when the angel says, "Come, I will show you this mystery." But now comes the climax. And the climax happens in our verses in 19:11 through 16, and let's see if I can get to the upper part of this picture. Remember I told you Durer's squeezing it all in here. Oh, control, right? Yeah. Can you see that the left hand, it's your right hand corner? Oh yeah, let me see. I can't. The heavens are opening. Do you see that? And right where that sword is, do you see the sword? If you follow, it's in the hand of a figure on a white horse, and behind him is crowds and crowds of folks. Do you see that? Okay, and then you see the heavens are opening. Here's what Dürer is depicting. Excuse me. And this is kind of the climax. This is the climax, not kind of. Then I saw heaven opened. That's that third moment. And there was a white horse. Its rider is called Faithful and True, and in righteousness he judges and makes war. His eyes are like a flame of fire, and on his head are many diadems, and he has a name inscribed that no one knows but himself. He is clothed in a robe dipped in blood, and his name is called the Word of God. And the armies of heaven, wearing fine linen, white and pure, were following him in white horses, and from his mouth came a sharp sword with which to strike down the nations. And he will rule them with a rod of iron. He will tread the winepress of the fury of the wrath of God the Almighty. On his robe and on his thigh he has a name inscribed, King of Kings and Lord of Lords. So Handel is inspired. So, this is the third image of Christ. And now he's gone from messenger, angel, messenger, really strange looking slain lamb. Now he is a figure on a white horse riding in to do battle. But the most important detail in that whole scene is that he has blood on his robe. Now here is what interpreters have argued about for centuries. Such a great argument. Whose blood is it? Now you can make the case that he's here to carry out the wrath of God, and so he's been killing his enemies, so that blood is his. And yet, it's been tempered by language that conquering has to do with Jesus' own blood. And so for me, the blood on his robe is his own blood. It's a reminder that just as the slain lamb has 7 horns, that's symbols of power, the slaying warrior is bleeding all over himself with his own blood. This becomes then a reversal of you conquer by killing people. No, not in John. You conquer by allowing yourself, Jesus conquers by allowing himself to be sacrificed. That's a great irony that falls right in the face of the Roman Empire. Because believe me, there is no honor, no glory in being killed in the Roman Empire. And here is this group of followers of Jesus claiming, well, wait a minute. He was killed in the worst way possible. He was dishonored, shamed, thrown down, and then we say, and he won. We say that today. And he won. So there's not a call for violence here. There's a call for remembering that even the violence that Jesus is perpetrating here is colored by his own blood. I hope that makes sense. Some days it does to me, and some days I'm like, really, Jesus? Yeah, yet he survived. But he survived in a new way. Right, it's not like that whole Nero myth where it said that Nero stabbed himself in the neck. That he did do that. But remember I told you last week, but the Romans began to circulate rumors that he may have stabbed himself in the neck, but he survived. And how he's coming back to get us. I know. That Jesus is not like that. There's nothing pretend about his death. And those early Christians, as we do, don't say, oh, well, then he crawled out of the tomb and took a shower. Looked a lot better when he started appearing to disciples. We just don't think that. Other comments or questions? Yes.
Was Handel's Messiah prompted by revelation?
Again, we sing it all the time. Yeah. Yes, and one of the things we have not had time to do is to talk about how there's constant scenes of heavenly praise punctuated. And those are the hymns that we sing in the heavenly worship scenes. And then we see some terrible, dreadful earthly thing, and then we go back up and praise. So that's constantly going on throughout the book of Revelation, up and down and up and down. One of the funnest things I ever did, that I never did again, was one summer we here at Hack we had Sunday school all together in the sanctuary, and I got to do a lesson on the music in Revelation. That was really fun, but we're not going to do that now, sorry. Any other comments or questions before I go to the last? Oh, please, yes. Oh, yes, I forgot. We have to wait for the microphone. Thank you. Thanks, Bill.
Would you please explain the image on pretty much in the center, and what is the orb that's being cradled in the hands?
I think it's a kind of timekeeping piece, and so that particular angelic figure. And angels in the 1500s as well as in the day of Jesus were always male. I mean, we think of them now as female, but I think that figure is holding a kind of, it's time, and now we're coming. Good question. Thanks.
Does anybody else see Abraham Lincoln in here? I see.
Unfortunately, you can just barely see the Jesus figure in this particular. Yeah. Other questions? Yeah. Oh. Okay. So now the climax has come. The one thing John doesn't do is actually describe the battle itself. From the moment the slaying warrior appears, he begins to describe the effects of the battle, which is pretty horrible. But he's not describing the battle itself. That's why we say this moment, this moment is the climax, and then it begins to do the tying up of loose ends, sort of. John doesn't really do that, but he's doing what we call the denouement, which is let's see what happens after this and put it all in order and see how it comes out in happily ever after, and we're very much near the end. So the next thing I'm going to read, okay now. Oh, well that made it really small. Is this one. Now we're at the end, and these are scenes of the end, and we've seen the three images of Christ. Now let's look at the third image of the woman. Oh, okay, let me do this, now that we know how to do this. Okay, we'll start here. Okay, so you're seeing a city, right? Yeah. Okay, so now I'm at Revelation 20, verses 1 through 3. Oh, I'm showing you the wrong thing. This comes first. Okay, now, you see the sewer right here? Down here in the corner, down here in the corner, there's a kind of figure that's being pushed into what I would call a sewer hole. There's kind of a manhole right there, and then there's Michael. And here's what Durer is depicting at that point. Then I saw an angel coming down from heaven, holding in his hand the key to the bottomless pit and a great chain. He seized the dragon, that ancient serpent, who is the devil and Satan, and bound him for 1,000 years, and threw him into the pit, and locked and sealed it over him, so that he would deceive the nations no more, until 1,000 years were ended. After that, he must be let out for a little while. So let's talk for a minute. Remember the combat myth. The baby that was the son of the woman is going to conquer. In this particular case, John shows Michael as one of God's angels that was thrown down that came with Jesus to conquer the world. This angelic figure then comes and pushes him in, pushes the dragon in. The big issue here in this particular passage is this whole business of 1,000 years. And in the 19th century, American Christians and probably European Christians, and because they were the missionaries, probably Asian Christians and South American Christians, were really concerned with this question. What does the 1,000 years mean? And will Christians have to wait until those 1,000 years of peace before we live in peace? Or will we get to escape the tribulation before, and then the 1,000 years will be wonderful? That kept people up at night. If you're a premillennialist, and that's when I talked about those dispensationalisms. Premillennialists say all of these terrible things happen before this 1,000-year reign, And Christians get to escape it through the rapture. True Christians, not false Christians, just true ones. Postmillennialists say Jesus is not going to come again until after this 1,000-year reign. So premillennialists, I didn't say this quite clearly, Jesus comes before. Postmillennialists, Jesus comes after. Most people these days never tell their neighbors this, but we are millennialists. So if anyone asks you, just say, oh no, the Christian church disciples are millennialists, which simply means we don't care. It's not keeping us up at night. Our founder, Alexander Campbell, was a post-millennialist and spent a lot of writings on how Jesus wouldn't come again until after the millennium. So, if you want me to say, truly, 1,000 years is just a very long time. And for John, these details, while they may be very interesting, they are not the central message. And those of us who get caught up in trying to figure out these details are missing the central message. All right. Now I'm going to move to the other side of the picture. Okay, now you see that city? Okay, and you see the man that's standing over here, that's fallen off the screen. That's John, the revealer, and that's the explaining angel. And here's what the explaining angel is saying. Then one of the 7 angels who had the 7 bowls full of the 7 last plagues came and said to me, "Come, I will show you the bride, the wife of the Lamb." And in the Spirit he carried me away to a great high mountain and showed me the holy city Jerusalem coming down out of heaven from God. It has the glory of God and a radiance like a very rare jewel, like jasper, clear as crystal. It has a great high wall with 12 gates, and at the gates 12 angels. And on the gates are inscribed the names of the 12 tribes of the Israelites. On the east 3 gates, and on the north 3 gates, on the south 3 gates, and on the west 3 gates. And the wall of the city has 12 foundations, and on them are the 12 names of the 12 apostles of the Lamb. And I saw no temple in the city, for its temple is the Lord God, the Almighty, and the Lamb. And the city has no need of sun or moon to shine on it, for the glory of God is its light, and its lamp is the Lamb. The nations will walk by its light, and the kings of the earth will bring their glory into it. Its gates will never be shut by day, and there will be no night there. People will bring into it the glory and the honor of the nations, but nothing unclean will enter it, nor anyone who practices abominations or falsehood, but only those who are written in the Lamb's book of life. Then the angel showed me the river of the water of life, bright as crystal, flowing from the throne of God and of the Lamb through the middle of the street of the city. On either side of the river is the tree of life with its 12 kinds of fruit, producing its fruit each month. And the leaves of the tree are for the healing of the nations. And nothing accursed will be found there anymore. But the throne of God and of the Lamb will be in it, and his servants will worship him. They will see his face, and his name will be on their foreheads, and there will be no more night. They need no light of lamp or sun, for the Lord God will be their light, and they will reign forever and ever. Thanks, Betsy. So Durer depicts the bride of Christ as a nice German town that is coming down from heaven. He depicts, he uses the building style and all that for his own. For John, here's the third community. It's the faithful community, the redeemed community, actually. The redeemed community. It consists of all those who have held fast to the name of the Lamb and have tried desperately to follow Jesus against all kinds of pressures. We can tell that John is interested in showing the oppositeness of the harlot and the bride, because the same angel is showing the same reality. So there's a real sense of, are you choosing? Are you choosing? And so at last we get to what I think this book is really all about. Still can't do it. Let's see. In which community will you live? That's the driving question. Just one little archaeological note that's related to Phillips. Some of you probably remember Bill Tabernet when he was president. And when he wasn't being president, he was he was kind of an archaeologist, early historian. So he and a team of folks were looking for the place where a group called the Montanists, you still with me, in the 3rd century thought the city of heaven would come down. And they found it. Now, Montanists were an early Christian sect who also were reading the book of Revelation literally. And so they had gone out to the desert where they had figured that this city of heaven was going to come down. And they built their monastery in caves around it. And they had measured off the dimensions, and they're quite large, that I skipped over all that. And they measured it. And so Bill and his team were a part of discovering this particular site where once again Christians were getting all caught up in exactly the wrong thing. In exactly the wrong thing. Because this is a constant push, invitation, threat to determine which community you are going to live in. And the rest of it is detail that's told only to enhance the story and keep us interested. But not the main point. Not the main point. So in the end, it's a difficult book. It's a very difficult book. Martin Luther himself, when he first separated from the Roman Church, said that Revelation should not be in the canon, should not be read, because he could not see Christ in it. Well, I told you how to see Christ in it, so Luther was wrong about that. But some years later, when he himself began to be somewhat persecuted by the Roman Church, and those arguments, those theological arguments were growing into real war, he began to think, well, you know, this isn't a bad book, because guess what? The dragon is the Roman Church. And then it becomes very useful for that. Other Christians, John Calvin wrote a commentary on every single book of the Bible, 65 books, except Revelation, the 66th. The discussions about whether or not this book belongs in the Bible are as old as the day that John sent the letters to the 7 churches. But I think that if we were to not get all caught up in these details and these, what about this and what about that and when is this coming and can you tell me exactly when Jesus is coming? If we let that go, we hear a message. It's a harsh message. It's a punch in the face. I, for one, cannot be all the time this kind of Christian. I'm not sure anyone can. And it is at that point that I'm particularly grateful for Paul, who does remind us that we are saved by grace. And I'm particularly grateful for Jesus, who never talks about, well, I'm going to come again exactly 1,000 years before this great time, or what. Doesn't care. But talks about including everyone. So, that's why I keep reading it. That's why I think it probably belongs in the canon. It holds up a terrible picture, not of others, but of us. Of us. And it demands that we choose. Demands that we choose. Questions or comments? Yeah, Mike.
Don't you think we have chosen? We've chosen to do the, excuse me. You know, I don't know why this came to my mind, but I'm thinking about the 1950s when I was growing up, and rock and roll was so cool, but it was the devil's music. Well, 10, 15 years later, you're hearing all the great songs that we grew up and loved on TV and everywhere else. It was no longer the devil's music. And I think somehow Revelation, where he's saying, hey, don't, sell your soul to be part of this modern society. When it gets accepted into the Bible, it means that he may have written this, but he actually lost the battle.
Yeah.
And just an observation.
Yeah.
It's the rock and roll of.
Yeah, exactly. Now everybody loves it. Yes, thank you. Thank you, Mike. I think that the other thing that happens in your analogy is when we decide that rock and roll is the devil's music, again, we're looking outward. We're holding up a mirror to everybody else, and we're pretending like we're the holy people. And John is not doing that. He's holding up the mirror to us. Yeah. I think that's it. Thank you all so much.
Thank you, Nancy. Appreciate it. Thank you.